This just happened to me a couple of minutes ago. Me and my cousins went to Santa Monica Pier to play Pokemon Go. We went on a train and it was about half an hour to get there. After all that Pokemon hunting, we were going back home and had to take a train back. We were on the train sitting on different seats since the train was empty. After 5 minutes of being on train, the train came to a stop so it could pick up more passengers, and an African woman came in. The way I can describe her appearance is that she had raggedy clothes, and what stood out the most was that she had a mustache. At this point, most of the seats were filled. She sat in the front row and I on the second, so I was sitting behind her. She sat next to a person and started saying something weird to the person. Well, I assumed that because he didn't let her finish what she was saying, and the person got up, but struggled to get out because he was sitting by the window, and the woman was blocking his way. And after he moved to the back, I was wearing headphones and listening to music so I didn't hear what she told him. Then the train stopped again to pick up more passengers. A couple of people came in, stood next to where she was sitting. The woman then told the couple to not look at her. And then they said that they weren't looking at her. After that, the woman started grabbing both of the couple's hands and told them to stop looking at her. I don't blame them because she was doing some weird things that I'm going to leave out. Then they moved to a different location on the train. After that, she turned around to look at me, and I just looked out of the window to try to ignore her. And in the corner of my eye, I saw her with a creepy smile. One of my cousins sat next to his brother in the seats behind me, and there was also a random guy sitting next to me. And it was a bit of a relief because she won't be sitting next to me and bothering me. But she still kept that creepy grin on her face. It made me feel really uncomfortable. And then, out of nowhere, she turns around, not facing me. She starts moaning loudly, and everyone in the train is staring at her and has disgusted expressions on their faces. Then, 3 stops before our exit, the guy sitting next to me tries to get my attention by elbowing me a bit, and then signals that he was getting off the train. And as soon as the train stops, the guy gets up, and I also get up, but don't get off the train, and just stood away from her, and then the woman sits where I was sitting. So now she was sitting in my seat in front of where my cousins were sitting. Then I could see the woman smiling, and I could hear her laughing all the while staring at my older cousin. And I could tell that he was feeling uncomfortable. After that, our stop was next, so we got up and stood next to the exit while the doors were opening. She started telling my older cousin, "Bye, Eric," which is not his name, and starts laughing really loudly. So we got off and could see her grinning as the train started to leave. And after all that, we laughed it out, but still had the chills because of her mustache and the way she was acting. So, woman with the mustache, let's not meet again. For some background, I am a Marine Corps veteran. I got out because of medical reasons. I was also diagnosed with PTSD. I have never been in combat, but I experienced an event in combat training that happened to me while I was sleeping. This event is considered hazing, and it was done to me by my own unit. Since this event, I have always had trouble sleeping, staying asleep, nightmares. This is the first time I have ever shared this experience with anyone. Okay, so now for what happened. This happened 2 years after I had gotten out of the military. For a whole month, I had been missing work because my medication for my PTSD had stopped working for me. This caused me agonizing anxiety throughout my days, and nightmares, flashbacks to what happened to me in combat training nights. Another thing to note, we always keep the hallway light on and my door is always open so my cats can roam around the house. One night I kept having nightmares of different people breaking into my house. From what I remember, I had 3 different nightmares of 3 separate individuals breaking into my home. After the 3rd nightmare, I woke up to the dark figure in my 3rd nightmare standing in my doorway. I tried to scream, "Hey, who the fuck are you?" But nothing came out. It was like I was just screaming inside of my own head. This is when I decided to get up and murder this stranger, but that is when I realized that I couldn't move. My anger quickly became utter fear when I realized that I was completely defenseless, and tears started to stream down my face. The figure just stood in the doorway, not moving and not saying anything. When I blinked, the figure disappeared, and I was able to move again. I sat up in bed and cried. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I got my medication changed as soon as possible after that night. I have since had my PTSD under control again and back to work. Even though I still struggle with sleep, I haven't had an episode of sleep paralysis since then. I am a 46-year-old woman now, and throughout the years I have pondered an incident which happened when I was only 8 years old. My mother had separated from my father, and we were staying at the beachside location with friends, along with my 3 younger sisters. On this particular day, I was at a pond with a girl a couple of years older, doing some fishing, while my mother was a good couple of blocks away at the house. Along the side of the pond was a wooded area, which reached further back than where I could see. As we were standing there with our rods poised and line dangling in the water, we were approached by 2 late teenage-looking boys. One of the boys noticed we hadn't caught any fish and suggested a spot, which had plenty of fish, but we would have to follow them into the woods. My friend was really keen and immediately wound her line in and began moving towards the woods where the boys were standing. I hesitantly wound my line in and stated that I really needed to tell my mother if I was to change location. One of the boys said that, "No, you don't have to because we won't be gone too long." As I started moving towards the wooded area and into the woods following the 2 guys, I suddenly heard my mother calling my name from across the lake. I said to the boys that my mom needed me, and as I turned to run towards her voice, I could only hear the rustling of foliage behind me. My friend followed me back, and as I approached my mother, she asked where we were going. I said these boys knew a good fishing spot, and she walked in that direction to see where they were, but there was no sign of them. They had disappeared very quickly back into the woods. To this day, my mother has nightmares about what could have happened. I want to tell you a story. The places that I live in with my family. I live on the island of Oahu. The house that I live in has 2 master bedrooms. I slept in the original master bedroom. One night, when I couldn't go to sleep, I looked in the corner of my room. I saw a shadowy ghost that was pure black. I could tell that it was a woman because I have heard a woman had hung herself in our house a long time ago. I have seen her a couple of times in that room. Next story. My uncle passed away. He would have been 50 years old. My mom and I were sitting on our couch watching the Super Bowl. I don't remember which one it was. It wasn't a windy day, but my mom and I both saw the front door open and close by itself. Third story. I was walking with my mom and we were walking our dogs. I walked back home and I saw a shadow creature that looked like a cat, but when I turned to see what it was gone. This second story is shared by the same subscriber as number 1. Again, I work at Journeys, and this time it was more during the day. We had been pretty slow for a Saturday, my shift running from 1 to 7 that day. Now a tad bit of backstory about Journeys since the last story. My co-manager, Brandon, not using any real names in this story, no longer works with Journeys, and so when this happened to me, my boss was in the store, we'll call him Randy. Being slow for a Saturday was kind of fun for me. I got to reorganize the store and make sure everything was in its place, and make the store pretty. We have a system called Holes. You sell a display shoe, and you make your own display and so forth. Well, no one really follows that rule, so I started to fill all the holes in the store. I popped in and out of the back room with brand new shoes to start bar lacing and tagging each shoe. I had all the shoes I needed on the counter. I started bar lacing with me standing behind the counter, and my full timer was next to me. I was chatting and joking around. Let's call her Kimberly. So let me explain my store. My store is a bigger journey, so you walk into the store, and boys' shoes are on the right, girls on the left. If you walk all the way to the back of the store, that's where the counters are with the registers. Behind that, there are 2 large doors leading into the back room where my stock of shoes are. So, being behind the counter, I see a man walk into my store. He stops and is glancing around the store. I smile and call out, "Hey man, welcome to Journeys." He looked me dead in the eye and sped walked to the counter. It took me a second, but I didn't think anything of it. So this guy is standing here and just staring at me and my full timer. I look at her and give out a giggle. I elbow her and say, "Oh, is this your friend?" She was pale and just shook her head and said, "No, I don't know who this is." He kind of started mumbling to himself. Kimberly went away, and I know she was looking for Randy. He looked at me and started to twitch. "I need some clean shoes," he said. I went over to the Timberlands, which were to the right of me, and picked up 2 and set them on the counter. "Have you ever checked these out, dude? They are pretty cool." He looked at the price tag and looked back up at me with a smile. He sort of leaned over the counter with both hands on the counter inches away from my face. I was frozen. I couldn't move. "I'll buy these if you go on a date with me," he said and laughed the most creepiest laugh I've ever fucking heard. "I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend," I said. He shook his head and says, "No, you don't, Elise." He took out his phone and he went to the dial page. He handed it to me. I put in a fake number. He smiled and called the number. My phone was in the back room charging. He frowned as he hit the end button. "Did you give me a fake number?" My heart sunk. "No, my phone is in the back there charging." He smiled and walked out of the store. I automatically told my boss everything that happened, and he was on lookout. About 10 minutes later, I saw the guy walking back and forth outside of the store, staring at me and smiling. I ignored it because I was trying to finish my duty that I was doing. I heard a huge crash and jumped up and looked to see him picking Timberlands off the ground and putting them back onto the stand. He had ran into our front stand and picked up the shoes and ran off. I sighed in relief and started to work on what I was doing. I heard someone come into the store about 5 minutes later and looked up to see he had come back in and was talking to one of the guy employees, pointing at the shirts. Thank God I'm 4'11", and no one can see me behind the register. I ducked into the back room and sat for about 5 minutes. I walked back out and he was standing at the counter. He shot his head towards me and stared at me while I walked to the front of the store and stood by Randy. I hear laughing and turn around to see this fucking guy is shirtless and putting on the shirt he had just bought. After he walked out of the store with that creepy-ass grin on his face, staring at me, Randy looked over at me and told me to take a lunch. So I went to the back and ate while playing games on my phone. 20 minutes into my break, Randy came into the back room and told me that motherfucker had been arrested for sexually harassing girls and being high on bad drugs worse than weed. Later that night, I got a FaceTime from a random number. I opened it, but with my face covered. My heart sank as I stared at my screen. It was that creepy fucker. He had tracked my Facebook down and got my real number. He smiled and laughed. "I told you not to get a new number, bitch. I'm going to cut." And that's where I hung up. That's the last time I've heard of him. But I still know he's out there. So, creepy stalker drug guy, don't ever come in my store again. So I had something quite terrifying happen a week ago. I am from upstate South Carolina. I was driving to go meet my dad at the mechanics located in an area known to be a bad area. He never gave me an address till I missed my turn a couple of times. So it became clear I'm GPS dependent. I turned around in a notorious bad neighborhood. I will admit, I was on my phone, focused on the GPS, but I was slowing down at a two-way stop. I had full intentions of stopping, I promise. A black SUV with very dark tinted windows and big rims on the tires drove past me as I was slowing down, and the driver laid on his horn. Unsure of why he was upset, I gave him the universal "what the fuck" hand gesture. Nothing obscene. I watched the SUV come to a screeching halt and fly into reverse as I drive through the two-way stop to the red light leading onto a main road with fairly heavy 5 o'clock traffic. The SUV tags behind my car, just about kissing my bumper. Now, my windows are tinted, but not nearly as dark as the SUV, so it's clear I'm a young and fairly small-framed female. I stop at the red light with this idiot on my bumper, laying on his horn. I needed to turn left to get to my dad, but the oncoming traffic was a mile long, so I'm stuck. Stopped with a raging nutcase behind me. I soon realize how bad of a situation I am in when this giant 6'5" asshole gets out of his car, but seems to mess with something before trying to approach my car. I only had one weapon of defense, my switchblade. However, it was in my purse on the floor of my car and I needed to act fast. He gets closer and that's when I knew I had to turn right and just go. I start turning and he runs to his car, wheels screeching, hauling ass to catch up to me. He catches up, not missing a beat. The light turned red. I was petrified with fear, not knowing the intentions of this giant man. Once again, I see his car door fly open in my rearview mirror. I ran the red light as I watched him run back to his car and run the fucking red light too. At this point, I didn't care about the red lights ahead of me. I had to have ran about 5 red lights and he tagged right along. At this point, I was having a full-on panic. This had to go on for 15 minutes. I took a risk and turned back into the bad neighborhood with him still on my tail. I turned left at the next red light, which was to the mechanics where my gun-toting, big ball of muscle dad was waiting. Terrified, I pick up my phone and dialed my dad. What the hell? Dad, I'm being followed and harassed. I'm terrified. Strongman. Dad encourages me to lead him to the mechanics. I get there as fast as I could, never being so happy to see my dad and 5 mechanics standing around waiting to unleash on this asshole. I barely stop the car as I swing my door open and run to him. The driver of the black SUV realized who he was up against and burned rubber getting away. Thank God for Dad. So psycho asshole in the black SUV. Let's not meet. Ever. One random fall day, I was at home like usual, when I had a craving for some White Castle. I had some allowance money, so I thought I'd head over. I didn't have any permit or car yet, so walking was my only option. I didn't mind, as I actually enjoy walking. The White Castle was close, maybe about 10-12 blocks, so off I went. I got my burgers, ate there, and even ordered a milkshake before I left for my walk home. I had just walked out the door and started my little journey back home when I saw him. A man on the same side of the street as me, walking in my direction. He had tan skin, looked like he was in his late 20s, early 30s, and had a creepy ear-to-ear smile that wouldn't go away. As we got closer to each other, we locked eyes, and I instantly had a bad feeling. I was about to walk past him when he looked at me and said hello. Me, not being rude, said a quick hi back, hoping that would be the end of that. Wow, was I wrong? He got right in front of me asking what I was doing. By the way he talked, I can tell English wasn't his first language. Something about this guy was just creepy and off. Like he just wasn't all there. I looked at him, confused by his question, and said, nothing? Going home. I proceeded to walk around him to continue on my merry way. You come to my house? He asked, a smile never leaving his face as he looked forward to me giving him a yes. I couldn't believe that he straight up invited me to his place. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. No, I'm going home, I said, once again, hoping that would be the end of the encounter with this guy. Okay, we go, he said, and proceeded to walk with me. I mean, he walked right next to me. I didn't know what to say or think. I kept on walking and he kept on smiling that creepy smile. He kept on inviting me to his house, and whenever I told him no, he would just continue on walking with me. Did this guy really think he was just going to walk into my house all willy-nilly? I mean, I was clearly a kid. Wasn't he thinking about me having parents that wouldn't exactly approve of him following me? Honestly, I was terrified. Sir, please stop following me, I said in a very shaky, unintimidating tone. Fell on deaf ears. At one point, he tried to walk arm in arm with me. Immediately, I pulled my arm away. This guy did not know the concept of personal space. I must have repeated, please stop following me, a million times, all the while ignoring me and non-stop smiling and staring at me. I know now I should have gotten someone's attention or called the police or something. But I was just a kid and never really had an experience with a creepy guy before. I was too scared to do anything. I was on the verge of tears and I was starting to tremble from fear. It was a sunny afternoon and we were walking along a main road, so I knew this guy wasn't just going to grab me and run or attack me. We were walking in the general direction of my house, but I knew I couldn't go directly home. I absolutely did not want this guy to know where I lived. I thought of a plan. On the way to my house, there was a pizzeria that I knew cops hung out at for a bite to eat. It was about 2 blocks away. I figured if this guy kept walking with me, I would just go inside the pizzeria and get the cops on his ass. I prayed that this wouldn't be the one time that cops weren't there. We kept on going, still inviting me to his house, still smiling and staring, me still holding back tears and trying to keep my fear from showing. We were about 1.5 blocks away when he guided me to a wall, kinda keeping me from walking any further. He leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "What the fuck?" I had absolutely reached my breaking point. Without thinking or fearing what might happen to me, I swung my arm and punched him. I'd like to say that I had a majorly badass moment knocking this guy out, causing a black eye, breaking his nose or something, but none of that happened. Honestly, I hit him on the side of the head with very little force. But the surprise of someone suddenly throwing a punch at you was enough to knock him back a few steps. He really did not expect me to do anything. I gave him a "don't fuck with me, leave me alone" death stare straight in his eyes. I wasn't kidding around anymore. One thing about me is that even when I'm scared, I'm still strangely brave. I was prepared to take on this asshole, even if he was a little bigger than me. I wanted to seriously fuck this guy up. He put his hands up in surrender motion, still with that fucking smile, and said, "Okay, okay," and started to walk away from me across the street. I felt a sense of relief. Partly that this guy finally decided to leave me be and that I wasn't attacked by him. It was broad daylight in public, so he clearly didn't care about his surroundings. I continued my walk, constantly looking over my shoulder to make sure this creep wasn't still following me. I came across the pizzeria, and wouldn't you know it, 2 patrol cars parked right outside, with the 2 policemen sitting inside eating their lunch. I turned around and the guy was nowhere to be seen. I should have went inside and told them everything. How the man followed me, asked me to come to his house, and then asked me for sex. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I was still afraid. Part of me just wanted to go home and never see that guy again. I made it home, with the entire walk looking over my shoulders. Thankfully, he did truly leave me alone. I never told my mom because I was afraid I would never be allowed out again. To this day, she still doesn't know about this experience. I told my current boyfriend this story, and he was proud that I took a stand to this guy. Never did see him again. I hope he didn't do this to another girl, or actually got a girl to his house. I'm 24 now, and if something like this happens to me again, I will definitely handle it better than my 16-year-old self. So to the guy who attempted to have sex with a 16-year-old girl, I took kickboxing classes. So if we ever meet again, I'll make sure my fists land on that eerily creepy smile of yours. I'm 17, standing around 6 feet, 150 pounds. I'm pretty tall in my town, but some kids tower over me. I used to play football and other sports throughout my life, and always stay active. I live in between one of the worst cities to live in New Jersey, and one of the best cities to live in. With that being said, a lot of good and bad people cross over into my town. It was a hot summer's night, perfect for a little joint walk. I was with 3 of my friends, around 10 o'clock, smoking weed on the old train tracks that run through my town. If you keep walking on the tracks, you will start to walk into the good town that's next to me. The tracks are littered with trash and everything. One spot along the tracks, there is a homeless guy that built a few makeshift houses for him and his friends. Pretty cool. We just smoked 3 joints and started walking into the good town, passed under this bridge. My friend Gio pointed to the middle of the street as a guy was standing on the other side of the street looking at us, wearing all black with a hoodie on. Dark enough where I can't see his face, and was way taller than me. He was maybe a good 10 yards away from us. That rang an alarm off in my head, as I'd never seen something like this in my town or the other towns. I'm cautious and stay on my P's and Q's. I turned to my friends and told them, "Yo, let's walk back, fast." We stopped walking and stood almost parallel with him, same distance. We turned around and started to walk back toward the bridge. In my peripheral vision, I saw him briskly walking towards us. I was leading the group and started walking faster. Everyone noticed and sped up with me. I heard loud footsteps and started running. Everyone started running with me. We are getting near the bridge and nearly lose him, since everyone is athletic. We get to the bridge underpass and I almost passed out. I stopped dead in my tracks, I shit you not. The same way we walked was now blocked by what seemed like a person's massive collection of bottles she had found on these tracks and laid them all out for us to see. I thought to myself, this shit's not real, it can't be. How the hell could someone put all these bottles out in less than 3 to 5 minutes? I turned around and saw the guy now running, fucking fully naked, towards us. We kicked it in high gear and all went home without saying a word to each other. We've smoked on these tracks multiple times in the past and never encountered something like this. I have no clue what drugs he was on, but I don't want to be on his level. Let's not meet again. So, this story isn't something that personally happened to me since I was a baby at the time, but my family have told me this countless times. So basically, my grandma's mother passed. My grandma, auntie, and brother, who was about 4 or 5 at the time, so roughly 13 to 14 years ago. My brother is now 19. I'm not sure if I was with them at this time or not. But what happened was they went to a cemetery to leave some flowers for my great-grandma, and they told me it was throwing it down with rain, so they were rushing back to the car, and my auntie noticed my brother was eating something, and asked what he was eating since they hadn't given him anything, and he opened his palm to reveal some Dolly mixtures. Before you think, oh, I bet it was some creepy old man or whatever, I don't believe so. This is because my great-grandma always used to eat Dolly mixtures, and they believe it was her who gave my brother them. Not only that, my auntie had told me there was no one else around at the time but them, and my brother was most definitely not out of their sight. And why would someone just randomly give my brother some sweets when it's pouring down with rain? Or why would someone leave sweets around? They would have been wet and dirty, most likely, and I don't think he would have picked them up. I don't know if my brother found them or if my great-grandma really did give them him. But I think she did. To add to this story, a few years later, I think I was 8 or 9 at the time. My auntie, who was now married to my uncle, were going through some trouble with money and general problems, and it was a hard time for them back then. But I was oblivious to this at the time since I was young. She had opened the cupboard in the kitchen, and sitting on one of the shelves were a few Dolly mixtures. She questioned my uncle on if he put them there, but they both seemed bewildered because apparently neither of them put them there. My auntie believes it was her grandma leaving her a sign that everything was going to be fine, and that's exactly what happened. My auntie and uncle still keep the Dolly mixtures in the cupboard to this very day. I'm 16 now, so it's quite a few years ago, but it's the only sort of paranormal story my family have told me, and it does leave me questioning the paranormal, and if it really was my great-grandma who gave my brother those Dolly mixtures and left my auntie them. What do you think? For some backstory, when this happened, I was around 11 years old. My family consists of 4 people, both of my parents, my older sister, and myself. In that moment, we were living in a rented house a couple of blocks away from my grandmother's house, and a little over a block away from my school. In the last month, or a little over a month, my grandmother was admitted into the hospital due to all the complications old people have. But the doctors there said she wouldn't live much longer, so my uncles and aunts took turns to look after her and spend time with her. On this particular day, it was my mother's turn to stay at the hospital in the morning while me and my sister were in school, and my dad was at work. When it was time to leave school, I was supposed to go directly to my grandma's house, since no one was home. But on my way there, I still had to pass my house because I didn't want to walk through a busy street. Now in front of my house, there's a park, pretty small, and when I walked past it, I see my mother standing on the other side of the park, just staring and waving at me. She was wearing winter clothes, a green, orange, and black merino wool sweater. Mind you, I live in a country where it almost never gets cold. That day wasn't an exception, but it is pretty normal for my mom to be cold all the time. I ran towards her, and when I got to where she was standing, there was no one there. I went to a few places to ask if anyone had seen it. A neighbor, a store close to my house, but no one had seen her that morning. And after walking around for a few more minutes, very confused about it, as I still am today, of what I saw, I get to my grandma's house. I asked if anyone had seen my mom. There they told me that because my grandma's condition was getting worse, my mom would stay a bit longer in the hospital, and there was no way she was where I saw her. I talked about it with not many people, and the ones that knew couldn't explain what had happened that day. After a while, my grandmother died. So I am till this day confused if whether there was a glitch or was it my grandmother's apparition, given the fact that my mother and her looked so much alike. And the clothes I saw my mother wear in that moment were my grandma's a long time before, and they now belong to me. I don't really believe in the paranormal, so I tend to think of it as a glitch more than ghost stories. Anyways, I am currently 20 years old, and to this day, I have no idea of what really happened that day. I've tried these dating sites a couple of times, but I never found a good-looking girl until one day, where my friend told me to try this app called Tinder. So I did. After loads of disliking everyone, I found this girl that was perfect. She had long brown hair, eyes, big lips, and she was just beautiful. I liked thinking in my head, might as well, even though she probably wouldn't like my pics. After another hour, I gave up, looking for a match, so I just went to sleep. I woke up the next day and checked my phone. It said I had a match. So I looked, and it was the beautiful girl from the pictures. The day before, she even left a message saying, "Hey babe." I said hi. About 5 minutes later, she responded saying, "You're really cute." I was delighted that this gorgeous girl was calling me cute. And I responded with, "Really? You're so beautiful." She then responded with, "Yeah, you're handsome, sexy." So we chatted on for about 2 weeks. Things like soccer and dating stuff. Then one afternoon she said, "We should meet sometime." I said, "Yeah, that sounds cool. When?" She then didn't respond for 2 days, until she said, "How about tonight?" And she put her address and what time to be there. Red flags came up when she said 11 p.m. I thought it was weird. Why so late? But I just brushed it off. So I got ready at 10:30 and went off to that address. Now, when you're going off to meet a stranger, always tell someone where you're going, but I didn't tell anyone at all. More red flags were there when I saw this address was leading me into a no road. Never go off the road. Bad mistake. I reached the destination. When I saw big gates wide open, I drove through them. Her drive must have been 1 or 2 miles long, so that was another red flag. I finally reached the house, and it was massive, but what I noticed that there were no lights on, and no car was there, but being the stupid man I was, I got out of my car and knocked on the door. There was just something not right about this place. It had an eerie feeling to it. I then knocked harder since nobody answered. Again, nobody. I walked back over to my car. Then this older-looking man opened the door and said, "Oh, hi. Are you my daughter's date?" I responded with a quick yeah. He then said, "Oh, okay. 2 seconds, she's just getting ready. Come in." I walked in and boom. I never knew it was that easy to kidnap someone. Then reality kicked in and I realized that I'm in this stranger's fucking house. He locked the door, then he said in a weird girly voice, "Sit down." I said, okay. He then came back in and sat right next to me, put his arm around me and said, "What you want to watch, honey?" I then got right up and said, "Where the fuck is my date?" He said in a girly voice, "I am." I bolted for the door. He then ran after me, pulling at me. I shouted for help, and he said there's no point. Nobody's around here. I did the only thing I could think of and hit him so hard in the balls that he dropped to the ground, and I dashed out of there. When I got to my car, it wouldn't turn on. He slammed open the door, and I got out and ran. He shouted, "Come back, baby, I just want to play." I ran as fast as I could, not even stopping to look back. I finally reached the gates and ran past them, over the back to the road. I ran onto the road and nearly got knocked over. They got out shouting and screaming, but they saw the fear in my eyes. So they rushed me back to my town. I got a phone and I phoned the police. But it was too late. The man got away. Trust me, I never went back on that app. And before I even go on a date with a girl online, I have to Skype or FaceTime her first. That sick, twisted fuck is still out there, tormenting young people. If I ever see him again, I will kill him. If you see him, run. Run as fast as you can to the nearest phone and call the police. He's a dangerous man and needs to be locked up. This actually happened to my dad about 15 years ago. My family and I lived in these apartments in Southern California when I was young. I was 9 years old or so. Anyway, Our apartment that we were renting at the time was quite big for a 2-bedroom place. It had 2 living rooms. Both bedrooms had walk-in closets, and the way it was arranged was the front door led into the first living room, with mine and my sister's room to the left. Just passing the first living room was our modest kitchen. It also led into a hallway into our second living room and my parents' bedroom, respectively. I should also mention the way the outside plays a big role in this story. Our second living room also had a door that led to the outside and to a small walkway that was gated off. My dad, being an electrician, had his humongous toolbox in that walkway outside, as it was gated off and secure. One night, my parents were about to go to sleep until my dad heard his toolbox and the chain securing it being dragged across the walkway outside. My mom heard it as well, and aptly asked him if he heard that too. Confirming what he heard was correct, he proceeded to head outside, to the side of the house where his tools were, and knowing that there is pretty much one way out of there, he knew he had the burglar caught. With his baseball bat firmly in his grip, he yelled to the robber as he turned the corner, "Drop the tools, asshole!" He yelled firmly, only to find his toolbox still in its original place, and the noise of the heavy toolbox being dragged still present. Just then he smelled the worst stench he's ever smelled, like a rotting corpse that was just sprayed by a skunk with chlamydia. As he stood there in utter shock, the hair on his nape stood on end, and that sound suddenly turned into a kind of roar. The thing that scared him the most was that there was nothing there. Whatever it was invisible and inhuman. He then backed away slowly as he said prayers in Latin loud enough for this thing to hear, got to the door and quickly ran inside. When my mother asked him who was out there, he told her everything. She was so frightened. She began to weep, but my dad told her that it couldn't come to hurt us, and everything will be fine. He told us months later, not wanting to scare us, being that we were young at the time. But still, that was not the end of our experiences. But that's for another time. Backstory. One night I was in the woods with my friends. I was 12 then. I'm only 13 now. But anyways, I was the only one to bring my phone. It was getting dark out. I had been trying to scare my friend via text message about being alone in the woods. He gets paranoid easy, and so it worked. I told him I saw a cabin and was gonna go in. Now, my woods isn't really a place you want to be. This one blue shack gives you the strangest vibe. I swear it's haunted. There's a place that's full of spiders and has little waterfalls and currents where I've seen a satanic bunch doing weird things. These stories are for another time though, and I hope I'll be able to share them. Now that you have more backstory, let's begin. So my friends, one of them was my sister by the way, wanted to leave. I don't get scared easily. I've been there before just exploring with my cat. Yes, my cat, he will follow you anywhere. So I stayed. I'd explored the woods before, but I'd found a new place. So I turned the flashlight on my phone on and walked around for about an hour. My mom was either at work at the time or didn't care where I was, so I kept going. After a while, I was getting tired and was lost, and of course no signal. I turned off my phone in case I needed it later and saw, yeah, you guessed it, a cabin. There was a light on inside, so I went up and knocked. A man around 50, with a bit of a gut, going bald, about 5'8", appeared at the door. "Man, what do you fucking want, kid?" "I don't want no Girl Scout cookies." "Me? I was lost and I was wondering." "Man," awkward laughter. "You? Say, how old are you, girl?" "Me? I'm 14. Not wanting to say my age. "Man, right. Well, you get in here." As I entered, I could see there was something off. You could see a bloody knife on the table next to the door, and a few guns everywhere. But I saw a deer head hang on the wall, so I figured he was a hunter. Well, I was very wrong. I heard a packet being opened and a little splash into water. He then came in and gave me a sip of water. You could see a bit of a pill at the bottom, but I was scared, so I drank it, accidentally spilling it, all after 1 or 2 tiny sips. He looked mad, but went to get me another. I grabbed a small knife, checking he was busy, and got the fuck out of there. He clearly noticed and ran after me, surprisingly fast. I was glad I was in cross country, so running through the woods wasn't as hard as you'd think, but that's when things got worse. I heard a truck start. I didn't check behind me, but I could hear him yelling, "Come back here, you bitch. You'd be perfect for my collection." I didn't want to know what he meant, but I know he wasn't a normal hunter. I ran like hell, not caring about my asthma or the cramp I was getting in my side. I saw a pine tree farm. My eyes grew huge as I lived near a pine tree farm. The truck, of course, stopped and turned back as houses were all around. I could hear him yelling, "You bitch. I bet you aren't even 14. And with that, he was gone. I stopped running when I got to the road, glad I was near my house. Tired and close to coughing up blood, I threw up and laid down under a tree for my breathing to regulate, and I walked home. I have never told anyone this, but I'm glad I've never learned what his collection was, and I still do go into the woods, but never without my pocket knife, and always with someone. The story might be a bit long. I don't know if it's boring or not, but you can decide. This happened when I was 16. It was in 1996 and I was living in Green Valley, Sydney. My friend Chantel had come back from a trip to America and brought back a present for us. It was a board game. Not just any board game though, it was a Ouija board. We were all excited. We waited till night. I called my girlfriend Rhonda, her cousin Zoe, and my friend T over to play, along with my brother. Chantel and I, who were already in my room waiting, we waited till midnight, and as soon as it hit 12 a.m., we took it out, set it up, lit a candle, switched off the lights, and put a finger on the planchette, lightly, and started chanting. "Hello? Is anybody there? Is anybody there?" Repeating it over and over until all of a sudden it moved to hello. We all looked at each other quickly to see if anyone did it, but everybody had a look of surprise. We continued as we suspiciously looked at each other, paying close attention to everyone's finger that was on the planchette. Following the hello, I asked for its name, in which Derek was spelt. We asked how he died, in which he replied from a car crash, not that far from my place, and spelt out that he was following Zoe, that he was her guardian angel. He spelt out my name, together with Zoe's, and we worked out that he meant me and her should be together, which was weird because I was with her cousin, and plus, didn't like her. I asked why, and he spelt out, "Nice guy," and with that thought, this is BS for sure. Someone's fucking around, and I bet it's either T or my brother Key. So I figured I'd first ask something T wouldn't know, and then something they both wouldn't. I asked a question my brother wouldn't know, and he answered correctly. Then asked what's my mum and dad's full name, something T wouldn't know, and he spelt them both out correctly. First, middle, last name and all. Seeing the expression on my brother's face, and not seeing his finger move, I just knew then and there that they weren't doing it, and started to freak out a bit, but we continued playing and mucking around, asking silly questions like if he knew the future and stuff. He said a few things, and even gave us lotto numbers, but wrote joking. So we asked, why are you not allowed to give it or tell us our future? To which he replied, God doesn't let him. I don't believe in God anyway, but right after he said that, it just stopped, and wouldn't answer any of our questions for a while. My girlfriend started to get scared and wanted to stop, because it was already nearly 2 a.m. But I read that we weren't able to unless the spirit said goodbye. We asked a few times if we could go, but got no response for a few minutes. Then it went to no. It was at that time that I felt a tingle, and that something was off. Something felt different, so I asked, hello, Derek, are you still there? And it went to no. So we asked then, may we ask who we are speaking to? Hoang was the name spelt this time, and we were told that he was hanged at a park in St. John's. I think I remembered hearing something about that a few years ago. They said it was a suicide, but he told us no. That he was murdered by a group of guys that were in the 5T, a Vietnamese gang back then, over a fight with one of them trying to pick up his girl. And so after the scuffle, the guy called some of his friends, and they sat at the park waiting for him, knowing where his girlfriend lived and that he'd walk past afterwards, where they beat him and tied him up. It was a sad story and I felt sorry for him. But he felt different. I can't explain it, but he just felt evil in a way somehow. And I think everyone else felt the same by the looks on their faces. We all had a scared, worried look. I tried asking, can we go now? But he said no, and just wouldn't let us go. By now it was nearly 4 a.m. But we continued to talk and ask him why not. To which he replied, because he enjoyed playing with us and watching us, and that he had been watching us for a while now. So I asked, what, even when we do it and stuff? And he said yes. Creepy or what? I asked him why. What's the point in that? That's just weird, creepy, and so not cool. And no joke. He replied and spelt out WANKHAHAHA. Freaked me out because every time I did it after that, that was all I could think of. Whether he was watching or not. Anyways, this guy was a perv, so I asked where's Derek to please put him back on, but he said no. That Derek was weak, and he made him go away. Some guardian angel you are, Derek. Thanks a lot. My bro asked, so what? You're more powerful, are you? If you really are, then show us. Do something. If you really are. After saying that, I saw something walk past my back door through the gap on the bottom, and the candle flickered back and forth. My brother laughed and said, "Is that it?" Then a loud bang came from my cupboard, which made us all jump. I told my brother to shut up, but Hwang continued to toy with us anyway, spelling out death and not making any sense to our questions. Playing mind games, trying to scare us with noises here and there, every now and then. By now it was nearly 4 a.m. and we were past scared, and just tired and getting annoyed, and demanded to let us go, only to get the reply no again. But this time it was followed by him spelling out, joking, and then on to goodbye. And just like that, it was over. Relieved and tired, but unable to sleep after. We all just lay down talking about it and spinning out over it. We did not dare play it after that anymore. But even so, a lot of weird things started to happen after it anyway. Noises, sounds or knocks coming from nowhere. Things moving, or not being where we had left it. Disembodied legs walking past or hands banging on the windows. Things like that, so when people warn you not to play with the Ouija board, because it just invites evil in, believe it. Because it's true. That house was fine and nothing like that had happened, or went on until we played it. This story is the absolute worst date I've ever been on. For some context, I'm a lesbian, and my girlfriend and I used to go to sports bars all the time to watch UFC fights on pay-per-view. It was a tradition as we had done it on our first date, and it was always really fun. Seeing Silva's leg break like that live is something I'll never forget. Anyways, this time, we were seated at a 2-person table, right close to the bar, and had gotten ourselves a couple beers. I'm very feminine, so I get harassed by men a lot when I'm alone, but my girlfriend rocks a boyish look, so it turns homophobic when I'm around her. It's not great, but I'm used to these things. A man was sitting at the bar near our table, so close I could probably reach out from my seat and touch his back if I wanted to, and waitstaff were milling through the space between us constantly. Despite having to turn his entire body around to do it, this guy wanted to talk to me. I was pretty clearly on a date. My girl and I were drinking and talking before the fight came on, touching hands across the table. This guy didn't mind constantly interrupting our conversation. He'd speak directly to me, ignoring my girlfriend entirely, asking what I was watching and pretty tame questions. He told me he was here watching the Blue Jays game with his friends. motioning to a couple of guys beside him. It was late and there was no game on, so I was getting pretty weird vibes with his blatant lie. This guy was also pretty drunk and had another full beer ready to go. Not to mention his huge, bloodshot eyes and expressionless face made me very uncomfortable. I politely told him as soon as possible that I was actually here on a date and was not looking to make a new friend tonight or have any other company, and to excuse me and let me continue on my date. He didn't look at my girlfriend and proceeded to just turn around slowly and order another beer, even though he had a full one. Fucking coked-out freak. I was feeling good that I could get on with my date, but this guy had his body turned to just stare at me. He was so close to me, I couldn't believe even a drunk weirdo would be that overtly creepy. I didn't know what to do, so I just ignored him and made strained conversation with my girlfriend. He spoke again, interrupting my girl mid-sentence like she didn't exist. "You're pretty. Come around here often?" I told him again I was on a date and did not want to talk to him, bluntly this time. "You shouldn't be with her. Bet she doesn't even know how to spell Blue Jays. You shouldn't be with her." This was a weird comment. Maybe racist against my girlfriend, but definitely having some homophobic undertones about us dating. I was done with this. "Please stop talking to us," I said as my girlfriend finally told him. "She doesn't want to speak with you. Don't talk to us again." "I wasn't talking to you," he shot at her, finally acknowledging her with a lot of venom and a slightly raised voice. Just loud enough that the table behind us got noticeably tense. We turned away from him and started a conversation, ignoring him. He was still staring at me with the biggest eyes I'd ever seen on a grown man. He eventually told me he was going outside to meet more of his friends. I didn't acknowledge him, but was very grateful. Finally away from his stare, I told my girlfriend I was going to flag down someone who worked there and tell them, which I did. I told the manager, who said he would tell him to leave us alone, and got the bartender to cut him off. I thanked him, and we went back to our date, feeling a little better. I asked his friends if they could get him to cool it off as well, and to my surprise they said they didn't know him, hadn't even spoken to him ever. Once he came back, with no friends outside unsurprisingly, he continued to stare. He kept getting up and moving between going outside to smoke, his seat to stare at me, and the bathroom. Every time he walked by, he would bump our table, spilling some of our beer. At one point, I had to snatch up my girlfriend's beer because he came up behind her and tried to push it over. He kept just walking by and staring at me. I was visibly afraid, tearing up at moments in fear and frustration. He was walking by just to intimidate us. It was like that was his only reason to be there. He was escalating and people around us were noticing. We told the manager again while he was in the bathroom. I was afraid and outright told him this man needed to be kicked out. The manager said he would take care of it. I was skeptical. But one of the two huge biker-looking men at the table nearby touched my shoulder and said not to worry, that they would protect us and wouldn't let him hurt us. They had a kid with them, 14 or so, and they were horrified that this guy had been able to get away with so much in what was, bottom line, a family sports bar. It was so reassuring to have these scary-looking, muscly men backing us up that I actually cried and thanked them. I wanted to leave so badly, but my girlfriend stubbornly said we'd paid cover and not even seen the main event yet. That we hadn't even finished our beers. I told her that I had to pee for 20 minutes, but hadn't budged because I was both afraid to be alone and to leave her alone. She was in the same situation and we laughed shakily. Me wiping my tears and trying to make the best out of our remaining date. The man sat back down in his seat and settled in for more staring. He hadn't been kicked out. Of course. He went for another smoke, and my girlfriend said she was done with seeing me treated like this. She was small and didn't look like much, but she was also a trained boxer. Hence the interest in UFC. She was angry now. It was very tense. He comes by again and actually shoves my girlfriend from behind. It was like finally touching one of us for the first time had broken some unspoken barrier. And all at once, everything went nuts. My girlfriend jumped up and told him not to touch her, and he started threatening her, saying crazy things like she'd have to leave his girl alone, or he'd kill her. That she didn't belong here, and needed to leave. He kept calling me his girl. He was shouting and lunged at her, when the two huge men shot over to us, yelling not to touch us, and that if he wanted a fight, he had found one. Suddenly, security came out of nowhere and had to drag him out. It took two guys, and he went out shouting that he hadn't done anything. I was crying and looked up to see that he was still staring right at me. As they took him out of the door, he maintained eye contact with me and said quietly in his expressionless voice from across the room, "What you made me do." Our tradition of going to watch UFC fights was over that night. So I live in a small city, and I often go to a bigger city nearby to hang with some friends. We just came back from a night of smoking weed and going to the cinema. We decided it's been long enough for today, so we headed back home. My friend decided to walk with me to the bus station a little bit. We came to this deserted street and we saw a man walking. We thought nothing of it at first, but when we took a better look, we saw something very creepy. The man was masturbating while walking like it was a perfectly normal thing to do. But this was not the scariest thing though. The scariest thing was that the man didn't take his eyes off us once while masturbating. He was staring us straight in the eyes. We didn't really know what to do, so we just ran away. I suffer from sleep paralysis. I experience this every couple of mornings. It's been happening since I was probably 14, and that was a couple of years ago. Each time it gets more and more vivid, and whenever I wake up early or stay up late, I try my best not to go back to sleep. I will share my most recent experience. So I had woken up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and as usual, I might lay back, put in my earphones, and listen to Gorillaz. This has been my morning routine for about a week now. but I try hard not to fall asleep or give in to the sensation of falling into a comfortable mattress with a fluffy pillow. Well, the idiotic me decided that I was simply too tired to stay awake, and that if I fell asleep, nothing at all would happen. Which, by the way, every single time I do this, I have my paralysis. Well, I can hardly consider it paralysis. It was more like a nightmare. So your average sleep paralysis is that you might wake up without any ability to move, which will only last for up to a minute. Well, I call my experience nightmare paralysis because so far, I haven't found anything that explains my case online. This is how I can explain it. So if I have sleep paralysis, I only rarely see anything. Except I hear a lot of sounds, and I can feel hitting and vibrations. It is only when I close my eyes where real stuff begins, such as hallucinations of colors and demons. I can feel and hear everything. I have tried controlling my nightmare, but that doesn't work thus far. So this isn't my scariest, but recent experience. So after listening to my songs and dozing off, I experienced my nightmare paralysis. It starts off when I was outside my local bar, which in Australia is called a pub. And quite ironically, this is where my skateboard ran over around the time this all started. I was crossing the road away from the pub. My entire body was numb and hard to control. So I was walking when I saw this demon. I don't know what the hell it was, so demon is the only way I can describe it using one word. Well, let me describe how he looked. I'd say he was 5 feet tall, which is much shorter than me. He had a cartoony body with a light blue shirt and dark blue trousers. But it was his face. He didn't have one. It looked like it melted off or something. Lastly, he had a nerdy pair of glasses. He looked at me, except he had no eyes. So it is more like he faced me. And with a demonic, high-pitched voice, he said, "My glasses are upside down." What made this scary was that this sentence morphed into a scream, followed by his Play-Doh-looking head just spazzing out. I then woke up, and I was in sleep paralysis still. My eyes were open, and the screaming continued, even as I was able to start moving. When I left paralysis, the screaming continued. However, it was fading away. I didn't go back to sleep. This isn't my worst experience, however, it is certainly an experience that needed to be shared. And for those of you who go through the hell I went through, think twice before you go back to bed. I've told this story many times, but to this day, it still freaks me out and I still wonder what the hell it was that I saw. I've even considered hypnosis to at least prove to my parents that it was real, if nothing else. Why do parents also disbelieve their children? Considering the fact that I wasn't exactly known for telling stories as a child. Okay, just a little backstory to start. I can't remember how old I was, but I think I was pre-teens at the time and was absolutely fascinated with anything and everything supernatural or extraterrestrial. We were in Melbourne, Australia at the time for my cousin's wedding, and we were staying at my uncle's unit. My parents, my older brother, and myself were all in my uncle's bedroom while my uncle slept in his spare bedroom office. The bedding arrangements were my mum and dad in the bed. I was on an air mattress on the floor beside the bed, while my brother was sleeping on an air mattress on the floor at the foot of the bed. The bed was your normal, everyday double bed, raised about 30 centimeters or so off the floor, on wooden legs, so me being on the floor beside it would be looking straight under it if I was facing it. Now for the story. I awoke one night and I found I was facing the bed, and because it was the middle of the night, all underneath the bed was pitch black, except for two large yellow things. They were ovals and pointy at the ends, and they were next to each other, and that was all there was to them. There was nothing around them except pitch darkness. I lay there just staring at these things' eyes for I don't know how long, wondering what the hell I was looking at. As I stared, they disappeared and reappeared almost instantly. Considering the kind of books I like to read, it was kind of a surprise that nothing immediately came to mind, as it certainly did a little later. As I continued to stare, my nose began to run, so I got up and headed out of the room down the hall and to the toilet, where I knew I could find some toilet paper for my nose, and in doing so, was shocked to find that it was actually blood coming out of my nose. I'd never had a nosebleed before in my life. I blew my nose, blotted it a bit, and then went back to my mattress, and once more to those two yellow things. This time, as I stared, a thought suddenly popped into my head, and I went still with fear. They were like eyes, but not human ones, that's for sure. They were perhaps 3 times the size of a human eye, but there was no pupil or anything. They were just bright yellow, and their disappearance and reappearance earlier, the perfect act of blinking. I began shivering in a mixture of cold and fear. I turned over, facing away from the bed, but all I could think of was a hand reaching out and touching me. And to make matters worse, my nose was running again, or bleeding as the case was. This time when I returned to the bedroom, I stood at the end of the bed, shaking with cold, but too terrified to return to my mattress and to whatever that thing was underneath the bed. Thankfully, my mom somehow sensed that I was there, because she woke up and quietly asked me what was wrong. I told her there was something under the bed. She brushed it off, as parents like to do, but thank God she let me climb into bed with them. The next morning, as soon as I got up, I hurried around to my mattress and peered under the bed. There was absolutely nothing there. The entire thing was empty, which meant there was nothing at all that could have created those two yellow eyes. My mom tried to tell me that maybe it was a reflection off the digital clock, but my uncle's clock had red digits, and I think I know a number when I see one. Plus, like I said, there was absolutely nothing under the bed that the clock could have reflected on. Okay, maybe it was the cat. Mom, these things were way bigger than my own eyes, let alone a cat's eyes, plus my uncle didn't have a cat. In the end, she decided I probably hadn't seen anything and that it was a dream because of all the books I liked to read. But I know what I saw. And to this day, some 20 years later, I cannot sleep on the floor if I can see underneath the bed, and I cannot look under a bed at night. And just as an afterthought, my mom once told me a story about how one night, when he was younger, the same uncle whose place we were staying at, was out driving in the country and was chased by something in the sky. Coincidence? I don't know. But that's a story for another time. A little backstory. I'm a 17-year-old 4'11" girl. I work at a Journeys, not naming the city or mall. One day I worked a 3 to 9:30 shift, which usually really ended at 10 or 10:15. It was around 8 and the store was a tad bit slow. It was just me and my old Cole working. A very tall man walked into the store. Nothing threw me off about him, so I approached him, trying to make a sale. He sort of cornered me in the back of the store because I brought up how much I liked his Jordans and he talked my ear off. I kept hinting I had to get back to work, and finally I dismissed myself. He said he promised to come back into the store and say goodbye to me. Later into closing, he hadn't come back. Being happy about that and feeling safe, I locked up the store. I said goodbye to my co and headed towards my car. I walked out of the sliding doors and spotted my car. I started walking towards my car and noticed a car running parked in the middle of the aisles of the parking lot where my car was. I slowly acted like I was calling my dad since the windows were down. "Hey Dad, how are you doing?" I said loudly enough for the car to hear. The car slowly pulled out of the parking lot and turned in the opposite direction to the way I was going. Fast forward about a month later, I had forgot about the incident. I was working with the same co and I was in the back, working on shipment. My co, let's call him Brandon, not his real name, called me out front. Apparently a customer was asking me by name. Not really making a huge deal about it because I have regulars that want me to sell them. I walked out from behind the counter and my blood froze and my face went pale. The man was sitting on a chair with a van skate high in his hands. As soon as I walked up to the counter, he jumped up and almost threw me the shoe. "Hello, Elise. Do you have this in a size 12? I shrugged and ran back into the back and looked for his shoe. I mean, a sale is a sale, right? I decided this guy is fucking creepy, so I walked back to the front and lied, saying we didn't have his size, and his face dropped and he looked mad. "I can check who has them around us, though." He agreed, and I brought him to the register, and we looked, but he kept inching closer to me. Brandon noticed something wasn't right, so he came up and said something along the lines of, "Hey dude, they have it there, bye." Once he left, Brandon told me if he ever comes back in the store to go into the back room and wait for him to leave. He told me he waited forever to ask for me, like he was waiting for me or something, and that he always walks by leering in like he's looking for me. Now, a few weeks later, there were only girls in the store. I was helping these cute boys and flirting a tad bit, and I heard someone walk into the store. I had a baseball cap on, so when I turned around, and the man was standing in the front looking around for, no, not shoes, but for me. One of the girls started helping him, and the whole time he was looking around for me. I kept my face covered as much as I could with my cap. The idiot girl helping him called my name and my heart dropped. I turned around and smiled at him, his face lit up. And the girl, let's call her Kelly, asked me where to find a certain shoe. He had a creepy grin on his face while he just stared at me the whole time. I dismissed myself by going and getting the other guy's shoes. He was still there when I came back. I sold 2 pairs of shoes to the guys, then he walked up to me and started telling me things. I don't want to go into detail, but it was basically about how pretty I am and how he would have fun with me. Freaked out, he finally left, and I kept quite not wanting to cause a scene. When I locked up the store that night, I walked through the sliding doors, and the car this time was parked right behind my car. My heart dropped and I slowly walked to my car. His window was rolled down and he was grinning ear to ear at me as I walked up to his car. "Can I help you?" I asked. He nodded yes and begins to get out of the car. I start to panic. And out of sheer luck, my coworker walks by and yells goodbye to me. He hops back into his car and drives off. I start to drive away when I notice he's following me. I get onto the highway and speed, and exit off to a back road. I lose him. And every weekend since, he walks by looking for me. Till this day, I haven't said anything. The following story contains themes of rape and assault. If you are sensitive to such themes, you may wish to skip this story. To give you some background, I'm totally blind and I live in the Washington, D.C. area. Like many people with disabilities and elderly people who can't drive or don't have any other means of transportation in my area, I use a paratransit service by the name of Metro Access to go to work, to the doctor, to the grocery store, and so forth. It's important to mention that while most of the drivers who are employed with Metro Access are relatively professional and courteous, too many of the male drivers will try to pursue and even have relationships with women passengers, which is clearly a violation of Metro Access policy. Also, some of the men who drive for Metro Access have sadly assaulted some of the female clients, which leads me to my story concerning 2 of the Metro Access drivers who have transported me. I will refer to the first driver as Bill and the second as George. In my opinion, based on my interactions with these 2 men, Bill was the creepiest. All of my life, I've been able to read people very well, and I always got the gut feeling that something was definitely off about Bill, aside from the fact that he always made attempts to hit on me. For example, Bill asked me before he picked me up shortly before this past Christmas what my plans were for Christmas Day. At that point, I didn't have any firm plans for that day, so I told him I wasn't sure how I'd be spending my Christmas. Bill responded by saying, "You should start looking for a husband so you can start your own family. And you won't have to be alone on Christmas." Another time, as Bill was driving me to a local Home Depot, where I answer phones, he asked me if I could take the long way to Home Depot because he wouldn't have another pickup for an hour and a half. He added that he would still get me to work on time. In my mind, I thought this request was quite bizarre in and of itself, but it made my skin crawl even more because of how Bill had been trying to put the moves on me. I made it clear to him that I expected him to take me to Home Depot the quickest way possible, which thankfully he did. Where George is concerned, I, for the most part, never had any issues with him, except the last time he picked me up. He had a conniption fit when he noticed my hair was considerably shorter than he was used to seeing it. He even went so far as to tell me, for whatever reason, that he didn't like women with short hair, and to question me in a nasty tone why I had bothered to get my hair cut really short. At the risk of making this post too long, I will simply say that neither man had transported me anywhere since the end of June. Since Bill was picking me up on a fairly regular basis, unlike George, I was surprised I hadn't seen Bill for several weeks. As is the case with a number of low-paying jobs, Metro Access has a high turnover rate when it comes to individuals who drive for them. So it crossed my mind that perhaps Bill had found other employment. However, to my horror, a Metro Access driver who took me home last Friday informed me that Bill and George had recently been arrested and charged with raping female passengers. Evidently, Bill raped a woman in her own home. When he went to return her cell phone she'd lost in his van the day before. And George allegedly sexually assaulted a young woman with Down syndrome in a church parking lot he was transporting. In essence, I am extremely lucky, considering how many times these sickos had driven me, that neither one had sexually assaulted me, or worse. So to the creepy Metro Access drivers who are currently in jail for raping female Metro Access passengers, I hope we never cross paths again.